All right, everybody. Good morning. It's Bernard Nomberg. It is Tuesday morning. It is 10 o'clock Central. It's time for another episode of Nomberg Law Live. And I'm so pleased to have a longtime buddy of mine out of New Jersey, Bobby Zur, as my guest. Good morning, Bobby. How you doing, bud?
Morning. Doing great. How are you, Bernard?
Well, I'm doing well, and I'm so glad we've been able to catch up the last couple of days, online, offline, and now we're going to have us a great conversation. And for those of you who don't know Bobby, and I suspect there may be just only a couple of you out there who don't, Bobby created, after being a lawyer for the first part of his professional career, he pursued really his passion. And this, I'm so jealous as to the pivot that he made so many years ago is combining his love of travel, of writing and exploring and all great things. He created travel artistry. And I'm going to let Bobby tell you a little bit more about what travel artistry is about. But our topic today is the notes of a fellow who loves to travel during the pandemic. So we were talking about pivoting and how our mindsets change. But Bob, tell us a little bit about travel artistry and a little bit about yourself.
We'll do, and I am excited to get on to the kind of more current topic than the ancient history. But and these days I'm not a psychologist, but I play one on podcasts,
That's
right?
right. That's
Um,
right.
but I will give a one shout out to my former career as a lawyer, even though it wasn't fulfilling for me, and I'm a big fan of following your passion, and if you get lucky, the stars align. But I do find that almost every day, like the skill set of being a lawyer, what they say, what makes a great lawyer is that not that he knows anything, but that he knows where to find it.
Mhm.
The ability to research and issue spot and all that attention to detail. So, I still carry that along with the twitch in this eye from
Yeah,
the big
that's
firm
right.
days. So travel artistry was kind of a creation of my thought that the travel industry was becoming almost obsolete in terms of agents, right? The idea of, well, we need to call somebody to book our flight or to book a hotel, and I thought so too. And so my approach was simply to focus on relationships. I figured in every industry, as a lawyer, as a consultant, it's all about sort of your leverage, your knowledge, your understanding. I used to call it having a clue: knowledge, leverage, understanding.
Yeah.
Um, and so I dove in the way I had been doing when I was a lawyer. I was planning my old Stanford buddies' honeymoons at midnight in the conference room of the big Manhattan firm when nobody was around, and putting the photocopies in on under general, on the code,
That's right.
and sending faxes back in the 90s. And it was because I was just really passionate about the world and about connecting people to the world. And, not a good administrator, but I am a pretty good big picture guy. And the big picture was that at the very high end of travel was probably where I can make a difference, because travel is accessible to everybody. You can book online, you can book Airbnb. Um, but for those people who really value their precious travel time and who are looking to do something unique or out of the box, or just however they define high end, because high end means different things to different people,
That's right.
that's where I could really personalize it, know the hotels, know the destinations, and then and matchmake. So that's
And,
essentially what travel artistry is.
and I'm a client, former client, hope to be a future client again. But
There
guys, I
are no
want to tell
former
you,
clients. There are
that's
no
right.
former clients,
That's right.
Bernard.
Bob goes so in detail with his knowledge that he can tell you which room to stay in a country halfway around the world. And the reason why you want to stay in that room is because of X, Y, or Z experience that you'll get. And have been the benefit of that on more than one occasion. And Bob, that world was rocking and rolling until it wasn't. And 2 years ago, coming up, our whole world changed, most specifically about travel and our freedoms to move about.
Yeah.
And so your industry, like many other industries, really came to a screeching almost halt, but then more creativity flowed from there. So what did you do in your world of travel to
Yeah.
be able to continue to reach your clients and clientele?
So I will say this for anybody watching: if you ever hear that I'm about to launch a new brand, a new company, just go short, sell everything you have, because I launched Travel Artistry a week before 9/11, and I launched my Africa business between October of '08 and January of '09.
Good grief.
And I was about to launch a culinary travel concept, really, really cool concept. It was going to be right around June 2020 was the plan. So I do think crisis inspires innovation. For me, the hardest thing was to be what seemed to be counterintuitive to what everybody else is doing. In my industry, in any industry, when you see things falling apart, you try to cling, right? You try to hang on to what you can and scrape by because you have overhead to take care of, you have people to take care of, and I really understand that. But I was trying to look at it from the perspective of all the people traveling, all the clients, right? And what was everybody going through back then? A feeling of losing control, a feeling of uncertainty, right? And travel already has so much uncertainty with it that when you added the COVID layer on top, even if you were a relaxed person, most people were sort of just shaken by it. And that's a tough formula for travel. So when everybody else was saying, well, okay, you can't go to Asia, go to Europe. Oh, now you can't go to Europe, fly to California. Oh, you can't fly now, so get in a car and go here. I was saying, just hold on, take a breath, focus on your family, focus on your, mindset. And I was tamping down travel. I was telling people early on to not make plans 3 months at a time and then keep canceling them. And to me, it's about like morale. There's this. You remember Admiral Stockdale, the guy who ran with Ross Perot?
Yeah.
Remember at the debate, he was like, "Who am I and why am I here?" Well, a lot of people don't know he was like a famous war hero who was a POW for years in Vietnam. And he told this story that everyone around him was very optimistic. And they would say, like, we're going to be rescued by Christmas. And then Christmas would come and go, and they weren't rescued. And they were the first to kind of fall apart or to break. And then they would say, well, we're going to be good by spring break, by Easter. Mm-hmm. And then that came and went, and they would crumble. And his attitude all along was, well, I'm eventually going to make it through this. I don't know when, but I will. And the rest of it, I'm not going to worry about. And, I had a lot of time to think during COVID. So I wrote these deep thoughts by Bobby Zur to my clients, and I sent you one, Bernard. But the thinking at the time was trust is the most precious commodity. So I'm with you. I'm not going to tell you to travel. And when the time comes, we will. And then people did want to travel. I mean, do you remember summer of 2020? People were like ready to go. And we did have people travel, mostly domestically, obviously. And there was just about managing expectations. You can talk about that in the law and other things, but I learned a lot about expectations during that time.
The mindset of most people completely changed about freedoms to move around, to just do your normal life. And over the last 2 years, we've learned a lot about that. And for people who enjoy traveling or just aren't homebodies, if you will, it became, from a mindset, so difficult. And many still struggle with that now. And that obviously could lead us to many, many hours of conversation. But for our purposes today, we only have about 30 minutes. But I want to talk about your experience, Bobby, of what you're hearing from your clients and what you're learning in the industry about the change in the mindset of travelers. Even now, we know so much more now than we did 2 years ago, and the world is opening back up, different parts of the world more so than others.
Yeah.
But what, I guess, expectations and knowledge, what are you seeing about those topics in your clientele?
So it's a huge topic. Early on, I developed what I called like the COVID Rorschach test, COVID perception test. And I was just asking multiple choice questions, some of them a little tongue in cheek, about what's your comfort level? Because everybody had different feelings about it, and I wanted to match the hotel and the experience at the hotel to what they wanted, whether it was more precaution or more freedom or whatever they were feeling. And it was different in every destination. I found that that's changed now into 2022. Americans, I say this when I travel all around the world to other people from other countries, I say that Americans can be reactionary, kind of knee-jerk reaction. We're the first to kind of jump from something. We're also the first to forget and go back. Americans reset better than anybody, right? We're resilient that way. And so people now want the 10 out of 10 again. They're ready, a lot of them, for normal. And what's been interesting to me is I've been trying to manage that perception. So, for example, I had people who were supposed to go to Cabo for Christmas, just this past Christmas, right? Things were very good in Cabo, and fairly easy to get into the country. Just a quick negative test to get back in. Not a big deal. They were getting nervous reading advisories, and they said, maybe we should go to West Palm Beach, to Palm Beach instead. And I said, wait, you're telling me that you don't want to go to a destination that has almost no COVID, but you do want to go to a destination and has a bunch of precautions, required, at the property, but you do want to go to a resort insofar it's going to be 100% occupied with higher COVID, and so trying to kind of manage that perception. And the most extreme example of that is we've had a lot of people going to Africa, and people would say, well, Africa, I don't want to go to a third world destination, get stuck there or get sick there. And we've had to try to give them context and explain that in South Africa, for example, Omicron came first and left. They're ahead of us on the curve. And the wide open spaces, and people generally are masked, without getting into judgments of that. It's just kind of the facts on the ground. So there's just less issues there. And so we said, listen, if you want to feel free, like really feel free, go on safari right now. And we had quite a few people do that, and very few people cancel out of Christmas, which was kind of rare. And those who went said, they said, thank God we went, because, it opened things up. We're seeing that now for the summer with Europe. Europe is opening back up.
It's interesting, Bob, that you bring up safari. Some close friends of ours, neighbors, their family of 4 went for 10 or 12 days over the Christmas break, and they echo exactly what you just said, in that their experience was, whether they were in the airports or flying or while they were actually in Africa, they didn't have any more concerns or less concerns than they did at home in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah. My line used to be, remember there was Ebola a few years back in Africa, but it was in West Africa, 1,000 miles away from Southern Africa. And there were quite a lot of travel specialists whose clients were canceling to go to Africa. And one of my very top clients, I think her home was used to film Devil Wears Prada,
Sure.
Anyway, she was ready to cancel. All her friends canceled. And she said, what should I do? And I said, well, do you care about your kids' health and safety? She said, very much. And I said, well, then you should pack your bags, pack your townhouse, and move to Cape Town, because South Africa's borders are sealed and no one's allowed in. No medical people are allowed in who've been to those countries. But in America, they are allowed in. And there's a case in Manhattan, just a few blocks away from you, in a hospital. And that was the line I would tell them. They would always confuse her, but she went on the trip. With COVID, I say something similar. I said, listen, if you're comfortable shopping in your Whole Foods, you should be even more comfortable traveling to X or Y destination. Now, it doesn't resonate with everyone, and you have to meet people where they are, because everyone has different comfort levels.
Right.
And we have families with kids who don't want to have their kids, not be able to go back to school, or there's all these other issues involved. So you have to be sensitive about it. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting world, and it's more complicated than it's ever been.
How, and you've partially addressed this, but whether they're new clients or former old clients of yours, but they want to travel, to what extent are they looking to you for information about whether they should go? Because I'm sure you get that question every day when you're dealing with your travel plans for people.
Every day, and there are advisories in the U.S. State Department
Yeah,
online and CDC, and those advisories tend to be blanket advisories about a whole country, as opposed to like don't go to Mexico generally or things like that. And so we have to talk that through. But again, my default has been to err on the side of not pushing people to
hmm
travel, to
hmm
really make people feel comfortable.
yeah,
And then the bigger issue is the ones who feel the most free and ready to travel, gung ho, ready to go. They're the ones I have to rein in a little, because um, life's about expectations, right, Bernard? If you're living at home and you're living an 8 or 9 life, with whatever, like people of great means, we have a lot of celebrity clients and pro athletes and
right.
VCs in the Bay Area and things like that. And they've got it all, right? Good life, as you define it, winning, right? And even with the stresses of life and work, maybe they live an 8 or 9 life. When they travel, they're expecting a 10.
hmm
Well, when COVID hit, and with hotels being short staffed and some protocols issues and sometimes entry issues to countries, you know, back home, maybe their life is was a five in 2020 and
Yeah,
2021 at best. So I was trying to kind of explain to them that they should expect an 8. If they get an 8 on this trip,
yeah.
they're way ahead of the game, and that really helps in terms of going into the trip. That's going by the wayside now. Everyone's back to 10.
No expectations of nines. It's all tens.
It's mostly 10s, yeah. And I'm trying to and by the way, anyone who's been traveling lately, particularly even whether you're traveling very high end or not, you're probably noticing that rates are up and up and up.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
probably saw that out west in the
Mm,
summer. I sure did.
sure did. Sure did.
And supply and demand, right, gone haywire now. And
Yeah.
so when you pay more, you expect more.
No, that you're exactly right, because your time and your money are the two most notably your time, I would assume, and then your money are your two biggest commodities or two biggest things that you focus on. But for those of you just tuning in or may catch us on the replay, I'm talking with my buddy Bobby Zur, who has travel artistry. Bobby has been in the travel business, the high-end travel business, for 20 years now, 20 plus years. And what we're talking about is expectations. We're talking about knowledge. We're talking about his what I guess the best way to communicate to folks who want to travel but have questions. And I know that probably sometimes the conversations may be along the line of Dr. Zur, what do you think about what's going on? And I know you have to be careful there and you give them resources, but let's let's kind of pivot for just a minute. We're now in February of 2022, and I'm sure people who want to travel and are going to travel are putting that into place for the
Yeah.
spring, summer, fall, whenever it may be. I guess what I want to ask of you, Bobby, is what parts of the world, what parts of the country of the United States
Yeah.
are popular because of they're considered safer than other areas, or maybe they're more open than other countries. Or
Yeah.
do you have any recommendations? I guess I would ask.
I do. I think it's a combination of factors to look at, because even outside of our borders, some destinations have done a really great job of managing things. Whether they locked down for a while and then reopened, or whether they just
Yeah.
managed it all the way through. And other destinations have been hit harder, and they haven't had the infrastructure, or they haven't organized well. For example, a lot of countries in South America were slower
Mhm.
to sort of figure it out, and they're just getting there now. So all those trips to Machu Picchu and to Patagonia, those bucket list trips, they kind of kept dragging, from 2020 to 2021 into 2022, and I'm feeling more confident to get people down there and have everything work the way it should. In certain parts of Africa, again, it's just shockingly good how it is, but then there are certain places uh, where the testing is really onerous, or where there's mistakes that can be made, and you want to avoid as many wrinkles as you can when traveling. I will say the one part of the world that's the most closed still, or the hardest to sort of get back to normal travel conditions, is most of Asia, and Australasia, as we saw with Novak Djokovic.
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Australia and New Zealand have been real tight, and as has, French Polynesia and Fiji. So those people who are looking for those exotic trips, so in that direction, have been looking more at Hawaii, this year, even still. But it's interesting. Tell you a quick story. I was down on a private island uh, in 2019, a week before the hurricane destroyed the British Virgin Islands. And I was on that week before, I was on Larry Page's island. Larry Page is the founder of Google. And he has this wonderful island called Eustatia Island. And I was invited down because they were going to open up for 6 weeks a year to guests. And
Just 6 weeks. Wow.
6 weeks, because he wanted the whole staff to like feel fulfilled, to be able to work for people, and he couldn't be there all the time. And it was so great opportunity, for people who have that means, to do that. But what was interesting was I saw the general manager of his island on a Zoom panel in April, May of 2020. Everybody was talking about, when are we going to reopen? And all the other hotels were saying, we're hoping to open in June and July. This is 2020.
Yeah.
And he said, well, Larry has decided to reopen the island in March of 2022.
Wow.
And everyone's
2 years
mouth
later
dropped. Everyone's mouth dropped. Like, what are you talking about? This is going to be with us for 2 years. And those guys are pretty smart. And he said, yeah, I'm going to take the 2 years to really do some cool things on the island and invent some stuff and reopen in spring of 2022. So I will say he was the latest pushing out there of everyone, but that's an indicator of how open the Caribbean is going to be. We're seeing so many people traveling down to islands in the Caribbean right now, this month, next month.
Yeah, that's a lot of our local friends. That's where they're going. But others, I've had many friends travel to Greece in the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah, my daughter did an internship at a hotel in the summer of 2021. Kayla, who was there, and Greece opened up before a lot of other countries did. Italy followed a little bit, and a lot of people are planning trips to the Greek Isles, to Italy, to parts of France, to Portugal and Spain even. And so, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about how that's all going to go. But we're living in a world where things change day to day. So,
well, I was going to ask you, Bobby, with the service industry, at least the local service industries like restaurants, groceries, etc., they are hard pressed to have full service and staff.
Yeah.
So when you go to a restaurant, there may be portions of a restaurant that are just completely closed for the night because they just don't have the staff to support it. So what about the travel industry? You've got to have, at least my limited travels, I've learned you've got to have more patience. You have to plan out more time. But I want to ask you, as the guy who lives it, what are some things that people really should take into consideration when they have an overseas travel? Because it may not be life as normal. It's not going to be life as normal, travel as normal. What are some things that they really need to take into consideration so that they'll not, again, this goes back to that expectations, so that they don't just get so stressed out and they don't enjoy, they have a 5 instead of a 10.
In my world, in the luxury travel landscape, it's the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. Advisors don't want to talk about it to their clients or to hotels, and hotels don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I talk to a lot of owners and GMs, and it's the biggest issue they face is the inability to get themselves fully staffed. It happened the last 2 summers in places like Jackson Hole and Park City and others, because they couldn't get people to those destinations. A lot of people had left, the young people had left, or internationals weren't coming in. It's true abroad too. A lot of hotels are dealing with that. So what I've been telling clients and what I recommend to everybody is not all hotels are handling things equally. It's a delicate balance between how well they can gear up their service and deliver, how much they can have open, versus how much occupancy they're going to take.
Right.
The hotels that are desperate to please their investors and get 100% revenue back are the ones that are going to have the biggest problems, because there's a gap between, you know, expectations and delivery.
And if I'm doing my research and I want to go to X country overseas, where are some good resources? I know that you can always look at, you do some Google searching, but you may not get accurate information. Besides calling you at Travel Artistry,
Right.
and I put links to your websites.
Oh, I wish you wouldn't. No, I'm kidding. It's
Okay.
okay.
Um, how should Joe consumer do his or her own research when trying to figure out, is this the right resort for me and my family?
It's a great question. I would say this: smaller tends to be better than larger.
Mhm.
That's a very generalized notion, but since you can't control the outcome, you don't know what's happening on the ground, and since the entire travel industry is, including the sales and marketing folks and the people who put websites out there, are in the business of putting the shiniest face on everything. Everyone does that with their products. When you're dealing with an experiential thing, you're not going to get that information by looking at the website or by reading articles written by journalists about it, necessarily travel writers, because they're going to see the best of, you know.
Sure.
And TripAdvisor is great and those kinds of reviews, but they're only as good as the people posting. You have to kind of I'm sure you
Yeah.
use that a lot.
Oh yeah.
Testimonials are great, but you have to put the testimonials in context. So if you don't have any of that, or you're not sure what to rely on, generally the larger resort that has 300 keys, 300 rooms, has more volatility in terms of, you don't know how full it'll be. You don't know how well they can staff it. You don't know what can be open and what can't. If there are any, you can look locally to see in Italy or anywhere else, what are the laws, what are the guidelines on the ground? Like, are they still social distancing? A lot of, everywhere in Europe and other places, they're like a year behind us in terms of whatever you experienced last summer. You might experience this here, you might experience there this summer. And so keeping that in mind, the smaller you go, the more intimate, boutique hotel with 20 rooms, that sort of thing, they're probably going to be able to manage in a more normal way to how they did before, because they don't need to, they don't have the same kind of staffing issues, I think.
Yeah, it's all scaled, and I would think that now the boutique experience you may get more legitimate current information when doing your research. It certainly
I would
sounds
also
that
say
way.
that not all luxury brands are equal. I'm not going to name one versus the other, but
Sure.
different hotel groups are taking different approaches, more aggressive, less aggressive about what they're doing with their hotels. And as a general rule, obviously budget being important, but if you have the ability to go up versus down,
Mhm.
going up in this kind of world is better than going down, because the higher branded, the higher luxury caliber properties have more money invested. They have a reputation to uphold, so they're going to work harder to deliver, because they're also charging such astronomical rates that they would really be shooting themselves in the foot if they couldn't deliver.
Well, that's Bob. You've led me to my last topic that you just touched on, is about costs of travel. You mentioned earlier that prices are starting to come back up because of supply and demand.
Yeah.
Is it going to end up being some version of a price gouging, or do you think there'll be some leveling off soon of prices, or is this the new levels for certain types of travel?
So we've been in the price gouging Wild West for a while now, the past several months at least. In certain key hot destinations, you know, everybody wanted to go to the national parks. Everybody wanted to go skiing and outdoors and that sort of thing, ranches in Montana, etc. And because not every property could get reopened, there was even less competition, and so rates were going up and up. I'm not seeing that as much of an issue in places like Europe in the summer, because they're just happy to get business. Again, they're like where we were a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay. But I would say that the world of Airbnb and Verbo and all that sort of thing took off because people wanted the privacy and the safety.
Oh,
yeah. There are trade-offs for that. I'm one of the few luxury travel advisors who doesn't say don't look at Airbnb or don't do Verbo, even though it's it cuts at the knees of our business because we can't
Sure.
make any money in doing that. But my goal has always been to advise people for the best result. I still think that those kinds of one-off rentals are going to offer by far the most value, the most bang for the buck, but there are trade-offs that come with it. And there are more uncontrollables now than ever in terms of, even with good testimonials, cleanliness and services and support and things like that, that it's something to keep in mind. In the right situation, it's a great idea. But if you just say, hey, wherever we go, we do Airbnb. We're going to be in 3 cities in Europe, and we're just going to Airbnb a place, and it's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
It may or may not. Yeah.
Well, Bob, thank you for sharing your expertise, your experiences with us about high-end luxury travel. And it's just you're one of the few who I know who've on your side of the equation have lived through this the last couple of years. So it really means a lot that you shared this with us today. So
hey, I'm so, in a lot of ways, people get in trouble by saying they're grateful for having been quarantined or whatever else, but spending more time with your kids and those you love, taught my now 15-year-old girl to become a billiards pool hustler. She's tremendous at it now, so that's a skill for life.
Oh.
And I learned how to make crossword puzzles. I submitted a couple of New York Times Sunday crossword puzzles to Will Shortz, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. So
he will.
not as good at that as I am at travel, but yeah, it's been great talking to you. And we didn't even get to chat about sports and how sports lessons feed into travel.
Well, we may have to circle back and do round 2 or part 2. But guys, as we do every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, I have interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise, and Bobby Zur certainly fits that bill when it comes to luxury and high-end travel all around the world. He really has so much knowledge that if that's what you're looking for, he's your guy. So thank you, Bobby, again, and thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Nomberg Law Live.
Thanks, Bernard. Take care.